Epix presents the new original series, Get Shorty.
You asked me to make a movie with cash.
That a problem?
It's perfect, isn't it?
You're only as good as your next hit. Chris O'Dowd and Ray Romano. Get Shorty. Premieres Sunday, 10/9 Central on Epix.
This is the best of the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugatz podcast.
William H. Macy among the guests that we have on today's show. Wright Thompson has done a big article on Conor McGregor. What are you smiling about?
I'm just laughing. Someone just sent us a tweet because we were discussing during the local hour that you called Ben McAdoo Bob McAdoo on Mike and Mike, and someone sent us a tweet saying Bob McAdoo with his slick back hairdo. He sent a picture, and it's just a funny picture. I'm sorry, I distracted you.
Yeah, you really did, and uselessly, I might add.
I didn't think you were going to ask.
Well, you got a giant smile on your face as I'm starting the show. You've got a giant smile on your face, and what are you looking at? A picture of Ben McAdoo with his hair slicked back?
I just can't get past the look of Ben McAdoo with his hair slicked back. I cannot get past it. It does not work for him. It works for Riley. It does not work for Ben McAdoo. It was terrible advice, whoever gave him that advice. That's all.
So we've got on the show today William H. Macy, Kean Fahey, and Wright Thompson. And a lot of people today are talking about the desperation of the Miami Dolphins having to beg Jay Cutler out of retirement. The idea that Jay Cutler would feel like he's got leverage in that situation, even though Kaepernick's around, and he's just telling people, I'm not that interested. Gets the money up, $10 million. Now Jay Cutler is the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. Jay Cutler, by the way, who is one of the few players in the history of football, and maybe the only one at that position outside of Jeff George, where you wonder how much he actually cares about playing. Ryan Leaf, Jeff George, Jay Cutler, that position usually doesn't get how much does this guy really care, Jamarcus Russell, but Jay Cutler has a lot of how much does this guy really care. He was on the sidelines with an injured knee during a playoff game, and most people thought it's because he simply quit.
Correct, yes.
Which was totally unfair to him.
Totally unfair to Jay Cutler, but that was a story that was around for weeks after that game. And yes, players accused him of quitting.
So let me explain to you what just happened here, even though I understand that Jay Cutler has a relationship with Adam Gase, and even though I think Jay Cutler and Colin Kaepernick are pretty equal, and in situations where things are pretty equal, you're going to take the guy who doesn't have issues with the white and Cuban communities in your customer base. I understand why you would take the guy who has the relationship with your coach. But I just want you to understand that the Miami Dolphins just gave $10 million to an old, brittle quarterback who people wonder how much he cares.
Yeah.
I want you to think about that for a second, because people are inventing that Colin Kaepernick doesn't care as much about football because he's into activism, and they wonder how much he cares about football. And instead, the Miami Dolphins took a quarterback that most people believe doesn't care very much about football.
Right. Most people believe that with Colin Kaepernick. No one really knows if he wants to, I guess he wants to play football, Colin Kaepernick. With Jay Cutler, you know that. Because it's been around forever, people question whether he really
Put it on the
wants to be
poll. Put it on the poll, please. Who cares less about football? Jay Cutler or Colin Kaepernick?
Based on the information you have at your disposal, who do you think cares
less about football? So before we go down this path too much, though, Mondays and Sunday nights, it feels like nothing in the history of cable television has captured the American consumer the way Game of Thrones has. Not Breaking Bad. Not The Wire.
Yep.
Not Walking Dead. Game of Thrones seems to be the biggest show in the history of cable television. And what I wanted to ask you and ask the audience, who do you imagine makes more money, ESPN or HBO? I don't know the answer to this question. I think I know the answer to this question, but who do you imagine makes more profit?
I'd imagine ESPN.
As would I. So we'll get that information for you in a second. But the thing, do you have it already, Allison?
I have HBO's fourth quarter earnings from the end of 2016 was $857 million, up from $718 million the previous quarter.
Okay. So my guess is, they're making more money than I thought they were, but it's about the same as what ESPN ends up making. And so I'm watching. I don't watch Game of Thrones. I've only seen the first 2 episodes, but I saw a fairly amazing. Now, am I spoiler alerting here? If I tell you how last night, what I think is the ending of last night's episode, it's a show I'm a little bit ignorant on. So
I'd be careful here, man. I'd be really, really careful.
Well, but wait a minute. What I saw last night was a bunch of people who had already seen that it was leaked, and so they'd seen it before the rest of America saw it last night.
Right.
And so the leaked people were taunting the people who had to watch it in real time because they had it first and already knew what happened. But okay, if you're not interested in Game of Thrones spoilers, be careful. Get away from your radio and run away into a land where a woman can control dragons. So I see a clip last night of two guys on horses rushing toward the Lady of the Dragons, whoever she is, Queen of the Dragons. I don't know her name. And what I see is a dragon face come in front of her and blow fire, and two of the horses catch fire, and two guys jump into the water, and I don't know what that means because I don't know the show.
Right.
But what I got to thinking about was HBO has all of this money that they are pouring into this show that feels like they're making a feature film movie every week. It feels epic. What you are watching looks real. A dragon emerging to blow guys off a horse with fire. It looks real, and it looks like a major motion picture. And what it got me to thinking about is if you have that kind of money, the reason the competition is so important, the reason that Jeff Bezos is dangerous because he's eliminating competition and creating that he's in charge of all retail. The reason it's important is HBO has to produce that standard of television to stay out in front of Netflix that's $20 billion in debt, to stay out in front of everyone who's content producing. And it got me to thinking, though, why doesn't ESPN produce stuff like that? HBO, when it has gone into sports, has not done it well. They've got HBO Real Sports, but when they've tried Arliss or the Joe Buck Show or the Bill Simmons Show, when HBO, one of the few Achilles heels that HBO has as a programming giant is that when it goes into sports, it hasn't been any good.
Correct.
But do you understand what I'm saying? You can't imagine, can you? ESPN producing something, even though ESPN is a titan the size of HBO.
Right.
You can't imagine ESPN producing something that great. The best we can do is sort of the O.J. Simpson documentary.
Well, the 30 for 30 is probably, yes.
No, but I'm talking about something that feels major motion picture good.
Right. But as you mentioned, HBO is trying to stay ahead of Netflix and other outlets, and ESPN, they don't have that same competition.
Well, that's the thing.
They're not being pushed the way HBO is being pushed. That's the value of competition, though, is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the consumer wins when there's that kind of competition. ESPN could take that profit and put it back into its pocket if there's not much competition. But if there's competition, ESPN has to take that money and pour it into something. If someone else is making, that's why I was so disappointed with what Fox did, because I thought Fox needed to be, instead of poor man's ESPN, Fox had to be taking chances that pushed ESPN. Because if ESPN felt threatened, good God, they would attack with money. Like, if ESPN felt legitimately threatened by somebody, what you would see, it's why you can't challenge ESPN, really, because they've got too much of a head start and too much money. But the content that would be being produced by this company, if it was challenged and forced to throw its money back into something like Game of Thrones, which must cost, I can't even imagine, what is the budget on Game of Thrones? Like, I'm watching that, and I'm like, just feeding all the people in this show must be extraordinarily expensive. Hell, just the people they've killed on this show, just feeding them, just feeding the people who had to work in order to die on that show must cost a ton of money. It looks like per episode, it cost them $8 million an episode to make that show.
The sixth season is $10 million per.
Well, what ESPN does, what it pours its money into, and that no one can challenge ESPN on, is the producing of games. Like, How often do you have any objections? You're watching a game on ESPN. How often do you have any objections to the profession? That is the one place that feels sacred. Nobody has. I mean, you can have your quibbles with the broadcaster, but the product that ESPN puts on is the highest quality of when you're watching games. But can you imagine if they went into the Game of Thrones business? Seriously.
No, I cannot. Well, if they were forced to go into the games of Thrones.
Forced, right. The only way to get there is to be forced.
Right. But Monday Night Football is their Game of Thrones, is it not?
Correct. But imagine you could do that. It's the Disney company, man. It's Disney. If ESPN wanted to make a Game of Thrones or something like it, they would have the resources to do it.
I'm confused as to what exactly it is you want. Like if they decided to do this, do you want?
I'm talking about something other than just us arguing with each other about sports programming. A television show that I could watch on ESPN that would be about sports, that would force me on Sunday nights, if I care about sports, to go to my television and be the thing that everyone who cares about sports is watching. A fictional series not unlike Playmaker. What are you not understanding? Playmakers. What's the part of this that you're not?
Well, I didn't know if you wanted ESPN to dive into, go outside of sports and start creating shows in partnership with Disney.
Well, they tried to do like the Brian Dennehy, Bobby Knight movie. I'm saying, like, if you have the people that Netflix and HBO has, which ESPN could get,
absolutely,
you can make fiction that is as good as what HBO is doing. Why? Because you have as much money as they do. So go and buy the creativity that those people have. But you'd have to be willing to put $8 million into an episode.
Which is totally unnecessary because no one's pushing that.
But why would, do you realize that $8 million pays for everything that we have here in Miami? Everybody's salaries, all the satellite dishes, all the camera, forever. $8 million. Everything. It pays for everything.
I thought $8 million just covered you.
Hey, buddy, the wait is over. It's the 2017 Sui Awards, starting August 21st. The Sui Awards. Dan Le Batard.
We have a montage
of
useless sound that will be for. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my voice. What do you want me to do?
I can't relate at all. I cannot relate.
Stugats.
I'll tell you what happened there. I just shoveled 4 turkey sticks into my face without using my hands. And I ate them the way that a pelican might.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
Catch me and Mike Golick Jr. every Sunday for weekend observations from 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Roy is in charge of the music today. Let me let you look behind the scenes here. Mike is out. He's at a music festival, probably being peed on by somebody.
Yep.
Billy is out. Allison has had a headache since she learned that both Billy and Mike were out. She doesn't like to be on camera, so she's hiding in the back here. We don't know who's in charge. They're a little slow on the computers. Mike filed everything in a way that only Mike Ryan can find stuff, so we're going to be delayed on the sounds. I think we should do this. This is what I think we should do. The remainder of the show, except for when William H. Macy is on.
Okay.
Every segment, because Chris and Roy and Allison are having trouble finding sound when it is that we need it.
Yes.
Because they don't know how stuff is labeled in the computer, and Mike has purposely created an environment where he's indispensable, and he wants when he misses, he wants people to notice that he's gone.
Correct. Yes, he is sabotaged.
Right. There's a bunch of tripwires everywhere, and it's going to be like Game of Thrones. During the show today, we're going to lose people you care about. Characters you care about are going to be lost because Mike is he's booby trapped this entire thing.
How many days can you go to a music festival? I love Mike. I'm just curious. How many days? I mean, he's been there for 5 days.
Well, this is the big one, though. It's Lollapalooza.
It's Lollapalooza, but also he's old. He's realizing he was watching Chance the Rapper, and he's like, I don't get it. And that's how it happens. That's how you age, right there.
Yep.
Right there. You don't get it. Chance the Rapper, that's it. You're old. Like, young people have spoken on that one. You lose. I remember I told you. That's when I realized I was old, walking out of a Kanye West concert. I was 40 years old, and I'm walking out. I'm 3 songs in, and I'm like, I don't get it. This is terrible. It's good on my speakers. It ain't good in concert.
Right. How depressing was that for you when you realized it?
Yeah,
like walking
depressing.
out that
I
night.
mean, that is one of the places. Yeah. I can't think of a place. Look, there's stuff happening right now. Darren Dalton just died. Cortez Kennedy just died. I am feeling my mortality because the people I came up with who were my peers are dying.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think there is a greater way to check your age than music. Because I will tell you, this is one way to identify how Mike Ryan is aging. But if you don't go to music festivals, another way is just turn on the Grammys. And if you don't know 90% of who's performing,
right,
you're old.
Yep. Been old for a while.
Mm-hmm. Like, it's a great way to tell who's old. Put this on the poll, please. Is watching the Grammys the best way to tell if someone's old?
I remember a story that you said you went to a club and the music was so loud.
Oh, yeah, the last time. It's the last time I was in a nightclub. No, it was Live. Yeah, it's right here in Miami. It's one of the top 10 nightclubs in America by profit. I walked in, and my nipples actually hurt from the bass. Not even making it up. Like, my chest hurt, and I'm like, okay, I shouldn't be here. Too old to be in the club. Why? Because my nipples feels like the house music is chafing my nipples.
You haven't been in a club since?
I haven't gone since. It's been steakhouses since then. Steakhouses and lounges. I mean, basically, my nipples decided for me. I didn't even decide. It was just my nipples said, okay, we want to be near steak, not house music.
I would say they kind of go hand in hand, right? Like walking out of Kanye West, and then the next night you decide.
A lifetime of steakhouses. That's right. As I'm walking out of Kanye West, it was, or walking out of Live, I'm like walking to my car, and it's like, that's it. It's over. Steakhouses from here on in. So I want to get into a handful of things over the course of the show, but Stugat's been arguing with his wife all weekend about this story that has captured a lot of attention throughout America, which is a young woman who was texting her boyfriend to kill himself, ends up going to jail because he actually did it. And a lot of people are arguing what should be the punishment. Did she get off light? Was the punishment too harsh? Right. She is now going to jail for how long?
I believe it's 15 months. She was charged with manslaughter. Her name is Michelle Carter. So 2020 did a whole thing on it.
Well, hold on to it because we're up against it here. Okay. Let's talk about this next segment because we don't have time to do it. But see if you can, in this text, Stugat, see if you can tell the theme here from this texter. The only 2 problems with ESPN's broadcasts, and their major problems, Doris Burke and Jessica Mendoza. I bet I could easily crowdfund $8 million per week for ESPN to get rid of Jessica Mendoza, Sarah Spain, and Jamel Hill. I wonder what's happening there. Any clues? Any thread? It's because all of those people are awful, right? It's because Jamel Hill, Sarah Spain, Jessica Mendoza, Doris Burke, they're all terrible, right? No, that's not it. I'm not much of an absolutist, but I'll tell you what it's happening there. That dude hates women. That is straight talk.
It's not time for that yet.
That's another hour from now.
Okay, but it was straight talk. Look in a mirror, dude. Seriously. Like, what's happening in your life? You hate women. The hell is wrong with any of those women? The problem's in the mirror, dude.
They're the best we have.
That's like wander around and look in a mirror, and there's the problem. You're looking all over for the problem. Just, it's in the mirror. Stop blaming Jessica Mendoza and Doris Burke and Sarah Spain and Jamel Hill because women would hate you too if they got to know you.
Awkward transition. Time for some ads.
Can't believe we wanted a straight talk billboard there.
Had a rough weekend? It shows on your face. Clean it up using the tools from the good folks at Dollar Shave Club. Not you, Texter. You don't clean up your face. You don't use Dollar Shave Club. You remain hideous to women so they can see you coming.
Don Le Batard.
Texter writes in, what makes you happy?
Stugats.
Do I give off on-air unhappiness? Do I give off?
Yeah, a little bit.
I do?
A little bit more recently.
Yeah, recently.
Yeah,
Really?
Oh, no doubt.
drinking,
Yeah. I mean, we're walking on eggshells around here, man. All of us.
Money,
This is very
probably.
therapeutic.
I would
I'm
say
glad
money.
this came up. Yeah.
Money. We can all agree. Money. It's money.
Money.
Makes him happy.
Yeah, money.
That's not
Money.
true at
Money.
all.
Money.
Well, it's the things money buys, really.
Right.
Like the binge drinking.
Possessions,
Possessions.
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. The Dan Le Batard Show is brought to you by Pennzoil Synthetics, taking synthetic motor oil performance to a whole new level. Make the switch to Pennzoil Synthetics today. Guest on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance line. Here's your SportsCenter update. The Dolphins and former Chicago Bears quarterback Jay Cutler agreed to a one-year deal on Sunday. Sources told ESPN's Adam Schefter the one-year deal is worth $10 million plus up to $3 million in incentives. 1979 AL MVP Don Baylor has died at the age of 68 because of cancer. And finally, a defendant in a money laundering case has at least two things in common with former bro Martin Shkreli. The same name and the same judge. The other Martin Shkreli pleaded not guilty Friday in the same New York courtroom where the former pharmaceutical CEO was awaiting his guilty verdict in his securities fraud trial. His doppelganger wasn't there at the time. When your big day or special event rolls around this summer, look just as great as you feel in rental suits from thebblacktux.com. The Black Tux is your new way to rent. To get free shipping plus $20 off your purchase, visit thebblacktux.com/Dan. For all the latest headlines and information, tune in the SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day.
So I never finished the thought. Because Mike Ryan is out and because Mike Ryan is protective of his computer, the producers are having trouble finding sound when we need it. And so what I was wondering is, should we do the show in reverse today? Normally, the sounds trail whatever it is we're doing on the show. Should we, each segment during the show, because Fat Chris is at the controls, he should just hit something and we do the show around the sounds. No matter,
second down and 9.
No matter where we are in the show, because he doesn't know what it is that he's pressing back there, and he's just going to press stuff.
Right.
And so you get Brent Musburger. Should we do it that way, where we randomly have to move the subject matter to whatever the sound is, and the sound is going to be, we're going to be playing the lotto with the sound because we have no idea what Chris is hitting, and Chris has no idea what he's hitting.
Cannonball!
I mean, I'm okay with that if you want to do it. You're saying you want to do it once a segment? Because I'm wondering where we would take that cannonball sound, where we would go with it.
I was thinking about it. This might not work. Is what I was thinking about as that happened right there.
Well, see, but you could take it a number of different angles. Like, he hits cannonball there, and I could turn it into a conversation that Josh Norman had over the weekend about how you could shoot cannons in a stadium, but he can't do the bow and arrow. Or I could turn it into, best comedies of all time, because Cannonball is from Anchorman. So there are a number of different ways we could do this. I'm fine trying it at least.
Okay, well, I think you're the master. It's like having an instant opinion without any research and any facts is the way to go with Stugats. So it'll be a trigger for Stugats, and maybe that's how we play the game.
Strawman.
Ooh, stumped already.
Wow, straw man. No, I'm not stumped yet. I am not stumped.
You
Go
were
ahead.
staring at the microphone.
Your favorite beverage.
Yeah, my favorite beverage. Also, one of my favorite nicknames in all of sports. And we can get into a whole conversation about favorite nicknames in all of sports, because Darryl Strawberry was known as the Straw Man when he played in New York, and I love Darryl Strawberry. He's probably my favorite player of all time. So we could take it there if you'd like.
No, that's okay. But one of my favorite players of all time is Don Baylor. I remember where I was when I discovered the size and spectacle of Don Baylor. Don Baylor has passed away, and it's what I'm telling you. Don Baylor has passed away today. And the story I tell about Don Baylor all the time is Don Baylor was a Brahma bull of a man. And when he would get hit by a pitch, he would stoically run to first base without ever showing the pitcher that anything hurt. He wasn't wearing any of those pads and stuff. He was just a Brahma bull of a man who would not show pain when he was hit by a baseball, except when he was hit by Nolan Ryan. and he jogged to first base, pretending like nothing was wrong. The same stoic way he always jogged to first base. And when he got to first base, he crumbled. That is amazing as a pain threshold, right? It's kind of like the equivalent of stubbing your toe. You know the pain's coming. You just don't know when. You're trying to show people that it's not coming, but your brain knows before the rest of your body does. Here comes the pain. And so Don Baylor's running to first base with that pain as he feels it arriving, tries to hide it, and then just collapses on first base. And it's a tribute somehow to both Don Baylor and
held that in for 90 feet.
Right, tried to. Right. And then just fell apart when he got to first base. So a number of people are writing here objecting, Stugatz, to Kaepernick talk. So I don't know what to do with this. I really don't. Like, I don't really want to talk about Jay Cutler and Colin Kaepernick anymore. Like, it's...
So don't.
All right, let's talk about what it is that you wanted to talk about with your... was it Michelle Carter, you and your wife, what you were fighting about all weekend?
We were watching 2020 on Friday night. Michelle Carter is someone who had, and I guess this is fairly common for younger people, where they have a relationship that was built on texting, and that's it. Social media and texting, essentially. And they never really met. And Michelle Carter got into a relationship with a younger boy. And from the start, the kid was saying that he had thought about suicide, that he, had suicidal thoughts. And watching it unfold on Friday, she, through her text, she really, in my opinion, she's really the reason that he eventually took his own life, because there are certain things that were wrong with him, but she kind of pushed him over the edge.
She encouraged him by text. When he got out of the car, there was carbon monoxide. She encouraged him by text to get back in the car and kill himself.
But there were other things, Dan. There were times where, he had told her that he was going to go take his own life, and he didn't, and she mocked him for not doing it and said he was soft and said he was a wuss and get there and go do it, and then he finally agreed to do it, and as you pointed out, he was in the middle of doing it. He climbed out of his car. He texted her saying, I can't do this. She said, get your bleep back in the car and do it already. Let's go. And then she sent some text to very close friends of her afterwards saying, wow, if authorities find out some of the things I texted him, I could go away for a very long time. She said I could have talked him out of it. And it sparked a debate over the weekend, not just in my house, I think in a lot of houses, as to what should happen to Michelle Carter. Now, she did get, and they didn't go with a jury. Her attorney just decided to let one judge handle the outcome of this case. She was charged with involuntary manslaughter. She has 15 months in prison. She's appealing it, so she's free right now. And my wife and I were having a discussion as to whether or not she deserves any sort of jail time, if she should have been charged with anything, to which I said yes, and my wife said no, because my wife couldn't get past the fact that she didn't physically kill someone. And I just kept trying to tell her, imagine on one of our daughter's phones, you saw a boy texting one of our daughters, hey, get back in the car, go kill yourself. Would you feel differently? And she said, I can't believe he just boxed me in. Of course I would.
Well, but that's emotional versus rational. Like, the law shouldn't be emotional. The law should be rational. Like, yes, of course, if it's if the standard's always going to be, what if it was my kid, the penalties would be a lot less lenient. In all of jurisprudence, if that was the standard, what if it was my kid? I saw another thing. This was another story that made the rounds here recently in Florida. Did you guys see the video that went viral on these kids that were just flippantly on camera talking about, in the distance, one of their friends was clearly drowning. He was drowning, and he was so far out, and these kids were talking about it flippantly, like, I told him not to go out there. He's going to die now. He's going to die. Look at him. He's dying, and he's going to die. And you could just hear them talking about, they didn't even call 911 afterward. He died. Like, he drowned. But if they'd gone out there to help him, it's not, to me, the interesting conversational point was, well, what should you do? Because all of us are going to be aghast at how flippantly you just allowed someone to die. But if they'd gone out there, they would have been risking their own lives. And so people are asking the question, what should be the penalty for those guys who just videotaped a death that they probably couldn't have prevented, but were super flippant about it happening? Like, we're so careless about life as to viscerally offend anybody who was watching it. Anybody who was watching it would have been viscerally offended by how flippant they were about someone dying. And so if you allow justice to be emotional in those circumstances, anybody viewing that video would charge those kids. But what are they guilty of?
Of not helping.
I know, but that's not a crime.
The stories are a little bit different. I understand your point. This one, with Michelle Carter, it seemed like she was pushing him over the edge.
Right, no, I understand.
These kids just simply weren't helping.
I know, but both of them made me think about the same thing, which is someone is dying at the end of the transaction. What could you have done to help, or what did you do to hinder? It's from the same avenue of conversational arguments that you would have, because both of them, what did you think about what I just said? Should those kids be charged? The kids it's appalling. You watch that video, and it is appalling that they are allowing someone to die at that distance, and they could not care any less.
It is appalling. It is gross. I don't think they should be charged with anything. It's not like they sent the kid out into the water knowing that he wasn't going to be able to come back, and they did nothing to help him.
I know, but that's why the Michelle Carter punishment to me feels fair. She's culpable to a degree, which is why she's getting a punishment of 15 months. But it becomes involuntary manslaughter because she's not totally culpable.
You want more of the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats? Tune in starting at 10 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Hi, everyone. Stugats here. Support for the Dan Le Batard Show podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Stugotz, STUGOTZ, equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Dan Le Batard.
Mike, how'd you feel that went? Was that okay for you?
No, what do you think about it? What do you think? Since you think you're being smart a little bit about it, what do you think how it went?
No, not being smart. I would not do that to Mike Tyson. I'm not being smart. No, sir. I say it in the most respectful way possible.
Well, you're the interviewer, so you tell me how it went, buddy.
Stugats.
I'm sorry if I've upset you, Mike. Thank you for being on with us.
No, you didn't upset me, because if you upset me, you would have known about it.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
William H. Macy will join us in 30 minutes, and hopefully before then we will discuss whether backpacking through Europe alone is a white person thing. We will discuss that in a second, because this, we were just discussing during the break, they were playing that promo for Ryan Russillo returns from Europe, a solo trip to Europe, and Roy just spit at us. That's a white person thing. What am I going to do? Pack a couple of pair of underwear and travel across Europe by myself? No. So I want to know. Put it on the poll. Is traveling through Europe by yourself a white person thing? Yes or no? If you want to talk to Key and Fahey, the telephone number is 786-456-4837. I don't know whether it is or it isn't either. I'm just saying Roy spit that at me. So I'm trying to figure it out. Okay, I'm learning along with you guys. I know black people who have done that, but I think of them as doing white people things when they're doing it. Like, I know black people who have done it.
And you said to yourself, that's a very white thing to do?
Yeah, packing a couple of underwear and going across Europe. So we'll get into that in a second. Key and Fahey with us. Again, the telephone number is 786-456-4837. Let's start here. All of your studies, you do a lot of tape study in the offseason. What are some of the more interesting things that you've learned about the quarterbacks from last year and all the studying that you did?
Well, the first thing I'll say is everything in Ireland is a white person thing because we're just all white. So backpacking through Europe definitely is.
Okay.
The most interesting thing and the most relevant thing for the moment is that Ryan Tannehill was the third best deep passer last year, and it's not something we really talk about. And when you compare that, Ian Wharton, who's doing a bit of the charting that's similar to what I do, was going through Cutler's 2015 season yesterday, and he pointed out that Cutler had 24% throwing deep passes, and that would have been the lowest in the league. And during that same season, Cutler was throwing 30.5% of his passes within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage, which would be sixth highest in the league. So the thing you've kind of learned that's the most relevant at the moment is that Cutler, despite having that big, strong arm and being known as this big, strong arm deep passer, with Gase, all he really did was throw short passes and try and take care of the ball.
Okay, I did not know that, and so now you're learning it here with me, most of you, I would imagine. So what you're saying is that in his best season with Adam Gase, Jay Cutler wasn't actually a gunslinger, he was Alex Smith.
Yeah, well, the whole offense was predicated on not letting Cutler turn the ball over, and he still managed to do that quite a bit. The thing about Cutler is, if we talked about Cutler a couple of years ago, it would be fair to say, yeah, he's similar to Ryan Tannehill. He's kind of on that level where he can create big plays, but he's always going to have these mistakes as well. But when you look at his actual skill set, he's very much reliant on his physical abilities. He's not a guy who throws with timing. He's not a guy who's disciplined reading coverages. He doesn't throw with anticipation. He's not going to play within the design of an offense where he's asked to throw intermediate passes and stuff like that. The only way he succeeds is because he has this great arm that can fit the ball into tight windows. Now that he's 34 years of age, coming off a torn labrum in that throwing shoulder, the chances of his skill set aging well are very, very poor. And I think this is a lot more likely to look like Josh McCown than it is to look like someone who, like Eli Manning, who has aged relatively well. So this is the reason I kind of think once Tannehill went down, the Dolphins were kind of better off just letting the season go, even though you never really want to do that, because they're not going to have a chance of replacing him.
Isn't Eli Manning someone who has aged well because Odell Beckham has allowed him to age well?
Partly, but mostly because of what Ben McAdoo has done. Like, Manning used to be in this Kevin Gilbride offense where he would go under center from the start of each play, and he would have these deep 7 or 6 and 7 step drops where he's pushing the ball downfield, waiting for routes to develop. In McAdoo's offense, he plays in shotgun. They have 3 receivers on the field. They have a tight end on the field who's mostly a receiver rather than a blocker, and he can get the ball out quick. So it went from being this offense where Manning has to make precision deep passes, all his arm strength is required, to an offense where it's all about his mental acumen, his ability to pick the right pass and diagnose the coverage quickly. And that's actually going to be really fascinating this year, because when they add Brandon Marshall to the backside of plays with Odell Beckham and Sterling Shepard and Evan Engram, that's going to be a pretty fascinating offense.
I haven't heard a lot of people. Kean Fahey with us on ESPN Radio. He's on with us weekly during the NFL season, and he's very meticulous, and he's doing this in an unusual way, not unlike Bill Barnwell and Zach Lowe, where he's studying a lot of things that the mainstream media is not studying. But I'm of the belief that there's not much of a difference between Cutler and Kaepernick. You have been stronger than just about anybody I've heard in saying Kaepernick is a good deal better than Cutler.
Yeah, again, it's because of the way Cutler's skill set's going to age. 2 years ago, I would have agreed with you. I would have said, yeah, they're similar. But Kaepernick is now better in the pocket than Cutler is. The thing about Kaepernick is early in his career, he was a guy who stared down his first read, who ran out of clean pockets, who relied on his athleticism. And they were fair criticisms at that time, but no one really made those criticisms because he was on a team that was going to Super Bowl or going to AFC or NFC championships and competed in a Super Bowl, and we were talking about him as a generational talent rather than a guy who was kind of flawed but had his perfect fit. Last year, Kaepernick showed a lot of growth. He showed an ability to move in the pocket subtly, come off his first read in a more timely manner. He picked and chose when to run properly, and he made good decisions. Like, Kaepernick is no longer that guy who was completely reliant on his system. He's played in Jim Harbaugh's offense, he's played in Chip Kelly's offense, and he's played well in both, and they're completely different offenses. So I think, like, because Cutler's skill set is going to age poorly at this stage of his career after a torn labrum, I think you can't really say he's going to be as good as Kaepernick would be.
Kean, help me out here. Try to put a number on this if you can. Kaepernick is better than how many of the quarterbacks who will be starting in the NFL this season?
I won't put a number on it, but what I will say is Andy Dalton is kind of your standard. Andy Dalton has some similar issues to Kaepernick. I would say Kaepernick is more consistent playing to his skill set than Dalton. But Dalton is in that tier where he's guaranteed a starting role. And if all this other stuff off the field wasn't going on, Kaepernick would be guaranteed a starting role. And so he's probably, I would guess, maybe 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, that kind of range. But that's a big step up compared to like the 26th, 27th, 28th, which is why I don't really like going 1 to 32, because it implies the gap between each player is the same, when in reality you've kind of got 14 quarterbacks who are really good, and then maybe 22 who are good enough to build an offense around, and then you've got guys like Blake Bortles who are a complete disaster regardless of what you do.
Well, help me out here, because you had some numbers. Give us some numbers here on the research that you've done, because, for example, it seems to me like you came across the knowledge in the offseason that Joe Flacco wasn't very good during the season because of all the meticulous reading and stuff that you have to do after the season that you only have time to do after the season. Explain to people why Joe Flacco wasn't any good last year.
Well, Flacco, it's actually, his career has kind of turned since the Super Bowl. All of his raw numbers are worse now since the Super Bowl compared to beforehand. And what Flacco used to define Flacco's career was that he stood in the pocket and delivered the ball and was strong delivering the ball, and pressure didn't get to him. But over recent years, his footwork has kind of given up and his decision-making has become a disaster. But one of the things people point to is he completes, I think, 64% of his passes. And you compare that to Kaepernick, who completes 59%. But the reality is, Flacco threw 56% of his passes within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. Only Sam Bradford was threw the ball that often to that level of the field. And if you're throwing the ball within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage all the time, your completion percentage is always going to be very high. It's part of the reason why Sam Bradford set the completion percentage record. He had 62% of his passes were going that short. And Flacco, we're kind of giving a pass for all these awful decisions, for the fact that he can't run his own offense and the fact that he's reliant on these short throws, whereas with other quarterbacks, we don't tend to do that.
So wait a minute, you're telling me that Flacco was more conservative last year throwing the ball downfield than Alex Smith?
Yeah, Alex Smith threw the ball 56.33% of the time within 5 yards. Flacco threw it 56.87.
Okay, so it's a little bit, but okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but we have no idea what we're watching, seriously. Like a Sunday to Sunday, we have, like Kean does. He has a very good idea of what we're watching. You and I have no idea, because that surprises me.
I mean, I think it surprises most people in the audience.
But I know the gap between the two isn't significant, but like, this is Alex Smith. This isn't like Aaron Rodgers or someone like that. This guy is the standard bearer for you're too scared to throw the ball down the field.
We'll talk to you again soon, Kean. Thank you for making the time. Where do people go get your stuff? Tell them where to go.
Well, we're doing an ESPN podcast soon. It's going to start at the end of the month, and just at KeanAF on Twitter is the best place to find me.
CIANAF, also presnapreads.com. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Don Le Batard.
I do wish that Von Miller would embrace sort of a little more ravishing Rick Rude.
Stugats.
Ladies, feast your eyes on this sack dance.
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
Again, William H. Macy in about 15 minutes. In the interim, we are bouncing all over the place. Stugats' weekend observations are coming up later in the show. Wright Thompson spent a good amount of time with Conor McGregor. Wright Thompson, when he digs into your soul and writes about you, it's always interesting. So we're going to talk to Wright Thompson about Conor McGregor later in the show. Some of you don't like Kean Fahey very much. What's the problem? Like, his information is really good on a sport you really care about. There's no disputing that his information is really good. One of the reasons that we like him is not because he's wacky and entertaining and fitting within the construct of the nonsense that we do every day. His information is really good, and I don't get it anywhere else. There are a handful of people who are doing this really well at the high end, better than the mainstream, and he is one of them. And so I don't understand what your objection is to him.
I have an assumption here. It's probably the accent.
Is it the accent?
I think it has something to do with that, yeah.
Some of you don't like the segment because it's too serious football, and I understand that.
Yeah.
Because you want us to be wacky, and I'm avoiding the Cutler and Kaepernick talk today, at least in part because I find it a little bit boring. In instances like this where I feel like we might be hair splitting, I don't want to get into huge arguments about race when we might be hair splitting. It feels like Cutler and Kaepernick were kind of equal. I'm more curious in what happens next, because Christian Ponder and Kaepernick are not equal. Kyle Orton and Kaepernick, not equal. Tim Tebow and Kaepernick, not equal. Cutler and Kaepernick feels a little bit equal to me, so I don't want to have a race conversation or a social issues conversation about what the Miami Dolphins just did, because it feels like they could have taken either one of those two options and they would have been the best of bad options.
RG3 is also in that conversation. Kaepernick is better than him. I'm also interested in that. What happens if Jay Cutler gets hurt? That is a great, to me, you brought that up this morning on Mike and Mike, and that is a fascinating
Well, you have to root for it now. Yeah. Now you have to root for the Miami Dolphins, for him to get injured today at practice. Andrew Bogut situation where he 58 seconds he plays and collects the $10 million. And then the Dolphins have to make the decision again. And if they go Christian Ponder, feel free to blast them.
He just feels like a guy, Cutler does, that does not care. It really, body language, whatever you want to call it. But I imagine that conversation with his wife was like, 10 million, 1 year in South Beach. What do you think?
Well, the money clearly wasn't enough at one point, because otherwise they would have signed immediately.
Right.
All of that. I want you to think about this one for a second that I'm about to say. Are you ready? Jay bleeping Cutler, turnover machine, and a guy who at one point sat out a playoff game, and America, divided America, united to believe he was faking an injury and did not care, had leverage over the Miami Dolphins. That had leverage over the Miami Dolphins, who were sitting here, do we take the guy who America thought quit during a playoff game, or Kaepernick? Jay! And then they're calling him nonstop. And Gase, Jay, we had a relationship. Where are you? I don't really want to play. How many million? Throw in some incentives there. How much? $3 million. Why does he have leverage over us? Because we don't want to take Kaepernick. He knows we don't want to take Kaepernick.
Yeah. And then he found out that the next guy in line is Kyle Orton.
That's when he got scared. When the Dolphins were like, we're thinking about Kyle Orton. Don't make us do Tebow. Okay, $10 million. But again, Jay Cutler, brittle, fired, doesn't appear to care, is going to play his first down with a cigarette in his mouth. May have to put in a team rule that the quarterback is allowed to smoke cigarettes in the huddle. America agreed that he quit on an NFL playoff game. I felt so alone arguing, that's not fair. There's probably something structurally wrong with his knee. It's not that he doesn't care, but America shouted me down. You were wrong about Cutler. He doesn't care. He begged out of a game. That guy had leverage
over an NFL team. An entire organization.
That guy was able to tell the Dolphins, who hung in the wind and had to spend one uncomfortable weekend with the idea of, oh no, Kaepernick and the black issues in our huddle. Had leverage. And was like, nope, more million. Yeah, I know, Adam. Yeah, we had a great season together, and I know you love me, and I know we're good friends. More millions. More millions, please. Up, more millions.
He's a Trump supporter, by the way, Jay Cutler.
Oh, yeah, of course.
You think he told Stephen Ross that?
Of course he is. Again.
That's just icing on the cake,
I mean, honest to God.
He's a Trump supporter.
It's just crazy. Like, Jay Cutler shouldn't have leverage over any football playing situation because he's Jay Cutler. And Jay Cutler let the Dolphins hang in the wind all weekend with the discomfort of, oh, my God, we might have to put in a call that people are going to find out about to Kaepernick. Pray for us. I mean, it's crazy. And so Cutler's just sitting there with a cigarette in his mouth, probably naked, picking up the phone from Gase, and he's like, not enough. And just refreshing the screen on MiamiHerald.com and checking out all the articles coming out on Kaepernick. And Cutler's daring him. Yeah, go ahead and sign the guy who wore the Castro shirt.
Dare you.
Go ahead. Nude, just answering the phone every time Gase calls. Nude on FaceTime. What are you doing, Cutler? Just using my leverage. William H. Macy next.
That is Straight Talk. It is brought to you.
It's crazy. It's just crazy.
But I have him like his side on his hips, and he's naked, and he's got a cigarette. It's like a weird superhero.
Colin Kaepernick is the patron saint to the useless quarterback. He is making so much money for the useless quarterbacks. Just the threat. Colin Kaepernick can't get himself paid, but he's going to get Christian Ponder paid.
Don Le Batard.
I just looked over my shoulder where Max and Stephen A. were talking to Snoop Dogg about whether or not LeBron is top 5 all time. Get the hell out of here.
Stugats.
Who's responsible? Is that you, Salatoro? Who's responsible for that at ESPN? Because that person needs to be punished publicly. Profsky, is that you? Roberts, bald guy in sales. Who did that? You waste his time with is LeBron top 5 all time. I hate you.
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
The layover, directed by Macy, will be in theaters on September 1st. He's directing his own. There's a new trend. I saw that Jason Bateman, Ozark, great on Netflix, directing his own stuff. Ben Affleck, directing his own stuff. William H. Macy now with us on ESPN Radio. How did you get into this idea? Thank you for being on with us. The idea of, no, I don't want to just act in this. I also want to direct it.
It seems to be sort of a natural progression if you've been in the business for a long, long time. And I love comedies. I just wanted to see if I could do it. I've directed 3 films. I'm still on Shameless, and so we have a hiatus of half the year, and it's a perfect fit to try to direct little independent films.
Do you
and
like
The Layover's funny. I love comedy.
Was it difficult?
Yeah, it's really difficult. It's really hard to direct a film. It's the hardest thing I've ever tried to do. The good news is I fell in love with this business all over again. As the director, you get to see this whole magnificent machine, and they're the coolest people working in this business, and they're really good at what they do.
What did you do as a director that you did only because you hated it done to you as an actor? What did you learn? What did you learn, something that you didn't like when you were acting that directors did to you that you made sure not to do to any of the actors?
I didn't talk a lot is what I did. I didn't burden them with a lot of talk, and I tried to talk in terms of actions as opposed to emotions. As an actor, I want to be told more about what I'm doing, not how I feel about it. I know how, feelings, they're overrated.
Yeah, that makes sense. Who was the director? Did you model yourself after anybody?
No, I really didn't. My friend Stephen Schachter, I wrote a bunch of movies of the week with him, and he directed them all. I was in some of them. I'm sure he's had the biggest influence on me, the way he preps a movie. Dave Mamet. And then, I've worked with great directors, and you sort of soak it up somehow, God willing.
I'm curious here. I know you have to run. You don't have very much time. The Layover, directed by William H. Macy, will be in theaters September 1st. So I was wondering if I could ask you some rapid-fire questions here so that we can make this most efficient. If you had to pick one role that most people want to talk to you about, it's what?
These days it would be Frank Gallagher on Shameless.
Do you
love?
love?
They don't want to talk about it. They just want to go to a bar and drink about it.
Right. Do you love how dirty and uncomfortable that show is?
Yes, I do. I'm very proud of the show. At its core, it's got a good, strict moral compass. The family loves each other. And I love the way we deal with sex. I love that it's outrageous. I love that everything is on the table.
You've mentioned pride in your work. What is the proudest that you've ever felt about nailing a role? And I know these are difficult questions for actors, but just the most fulfilling role you've ever had.
I did a thing called Door to Door. It was on TNT, and it was about the Bill Porter story, a guy that had cerebral palsy who was a door-to-door salesman. That film came out pretty well. I got to tell you, the first film I directed, it's called, I'll never forget it, it's called Rudderless, and that's the first time I ever saw it. When you direct something, when you take all these disparate pieces, and when it comes together to a complete story, that I was pretty proud of that. And then I was on DirecTV. Shameless is playing on DirecTV right now. I saw the trailer and I didn't recognize it at first. And when I realized that's my movie, that's a pretty high to see, because I didn't direct the trailer, and just to see your work out there.
Do you regret not taking the voice of Marlin in Finding Nemo, the one that went to Albert Brooks?
Yes, I have millions of reasons to regret that.
Okay. Would you list that as your greatest professional regret, or is there another one better than that one, or worse?
Oh, Lord, I got stuff that can keep me up all night. I got regrets. I try not to think about them too much.
All right, but now I'm forcing you to.
Not going to go away.
Now I'm forcing you to. Give me one of them.
No.
I want like the one.
He's saying no. The Layover, directed by William H. Macy, in theaters September 1st. I will not be your monkey. The Simpsons, the writers of The Simpsons, have you heard this? That if they were to do a live-action version of the series, they say you would be perfect as Ned Flanders. Is that flattering or insulting?
It's flattering, and I got to tell you, I know this business, and they would have every reason in the world to tell me why I didn't get the role if they actually did it on a live series. They would change their mind at the last second, and it would be Morgan Freeman.
Whoa, you tried to go. I don't know what that was. That was William H. Macy as Ned Flanders. I feel like you could work on that. I feel like there's room there. I think you could. Do you love The Simpsons?
Oh, yeah. Who didn't love The Simpsons, yeah.
What is the best thing to watch on television, according to William H. Macy?
Well, you'd be hard-pressed to find something better than Shameless. It's kind of stunning.
That's shameless. What you just
our
did
numbers
is
have
shameless.
grown every year. I mean, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's a great show. I love Veep. What else do I love? Watch the news. I love boxing.
I loved you as the shoveler in Mystery Men. That movie's underrated. I'm not even kidding.
I agree.
That movie is underrated. It is funny and weird.
Yeah, weird being the operative word, too. And we might do another Wild Hogs. Tim Allen called me up, and he said maybe it's going to happen. Wild Hogs. The hogs ride again. Do you guys ride? Yeah. I love riding motorcycles.
I think motorcycles should be illegal. I think that's so unsafe as to be totally illegal. Like that.
That's what makes them fun, you bozo.
That's perfect. We'll let you go on that note. The Layover, directed by Macy, will be in theaters on September 1st. It is.
Anything dangerous you think should be illegal?
Yes,
I'm with Macy on
this, man. William, thank you for being on with us. We appreciate it.
You guys are having too much fun.
Yeah, that's the truth. We want to have you on again. Thank you, sir.
Talk to you tomorrow?
Yeah. I want to keep talking to him.
That's so many questions.
Yeah, I've got a ton more. Allison, see if you can get him again, because I'd like to talk to him some more. Do you understand what I'm saying about motorcycles, though? I know. Put it on the poll. Should motorcycles be illegal? It's just, I tell you why, Stugotz. I know I'm joking about it, but I recently lost a friend to a motorcycle. And it doesn't seem worth it to be careening down the road at 70 miles an hour with missiles all over the place that could kill you, and you don't have any protective armor, or the helmet's not enough. And if you go flying off your motorcycle, the best case scenario is that you're going to be skidding on the ground and losing your skin at 60 or 70 miles an hour. That's the best case scenario for you if you fall off the motorcycle. Like, I know why people love it, and I get it, but every time one of those speeds by me on the highway, I'm like, that shouldn't be allowed. People shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Well, that's the thing. So that's where I'll agree with you. It's the busy highway and the guy weaving in and out of traffic going, like 110 miles per hour. That seems really dangerous. But you could die in a car. You could die in a roller coaster. You could die in a number of places.
I know, but we're talking about probabilities. You are more likely to die on a motorcycle than you are in a car based on number of motorcycle riders compared to number of riders of cars. And you're more likely to die on a motorcycle than you are on a roller coaster. And I'm just talking about probabilities. Yeah, you could die anywhere. We don't need to ban everything. But I'm telling you, every time someone goes past me at 100 miles an hour on the highway, and for some reason it happens an awful lot in Miami, awful lot. I've had it happen to me, a guy on the back wheel only. And I know I sound like a repressed prude. I know that. And I know I sound like something, but I'm telling you, I've lost a friend to that, and I've had multiple friends do unbelievable damage to their body because of that. And I don't have that happening with cars. And I understand that cars offer the illusion of safety in a lot of circumstances, but also the car can protect you in a way a motorcycle can't. This is gonna divide people. It's going to be the most shocking thing ever said on this program. The motorcycle riders are so mad at me right now.
Yes,
so mad.
Yes, they are.
Like insane. I now managed look, this is impressive. Let's think about what just happened there.
Huh.
During an interview with William H. Macy, I did not merely get called a bozo as punctuation and dismount on that interview, but also I bothered and offended biker gangs.
You don't want to mess with Hell's Angels, man. It's bad.
Art Briles' Angels?
Hey.
Catch more of the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz, 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Epix presents the new original series, Get Shorty.
That is a good title.
To make it in Hollywood, it takes muscle.
If you don't produce my film, I'll ruin you.
A B-list producer.
You asked me to make a movie with cash.
That a problem?
We can work it out.
And a mob boss.
I like John Stamos. Could he be in this?
What?
Chris O'Dowd from Bridesmaids.
It's good.
And Ray Romano.
Do we have a deal?
Get Shorty. Premieres Sunday, 10/9 Central. Only on Epix.
Dan Le Batard.
The monkey's throwing barrels at you, Dan.
Stugotz.
The monkey is throwing barrels at you.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
There are three things I want to get to before we get to Wright Thompson. First of all, Steph Curry, among the people that he finished better than, the 429th ranked golfer in the world, the 219th ranked golfer in the world, the 214th ranked golfer in the world, and the 185th ranked golfer in the world. Also, there were some unranked people and some people in the thousands of the rankings, but I'm still stunned that Steph Curry was able to finish ahead of any of these people.
I'm not, you're going to get mad at me. Surprised, not stunned. Okay? Like, I just wasn't stunned because when you're a scratch golfer and you're going out there and playing with other guys, Dan, I'm telling you.
I'm stunned that he's a scratch golfer. And I'm stunned that he can do it in tournament play and be better than some of the ranked players in the world.
I'm stunned that you're stunned that a world-class athlete is a scratch golfer.
You want to talk about stunned versus surprised, Stugotz, and how you weren't surprised even though last week you were talking about what a ridiculous event it was and that you weren't going to watch it and that Steph Curry shouldn't be doing it, and now you're not surprised at all. Like, I mean...
I'm just, Dan, he's a scratch. I knew he was a great golfer headed into the tournament. I'm not surprised that he beat a couple of guys in a couple of rounds. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Secondary thing, and forgiveness to Wright Thompson for getting clogged up in all of this stuff. But Allison is so literal-minded that Allison just came in here, and she's driving me crazy with her fidgetiness because anytime I walk into a room, she reacts as if she's being attacked by a SWAT team. Like, she just jumps and gets crazy. And so she was just asking, how do I do this poll? What just happened there? Is it yes or no? How do I do this? She's taking the polls literally when we don't mean for her to take any of the polls make fun of polls. What just happened there is the Daily Sports Show, and just put yes or no, and it doesn't matter. Thirdly, again, the Miami Dolphins signed Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler had leverage over the Miami Dolphins. Jay Cutler, I remind you, won one of our tournaments because he looks like this.
Jay Cutler looks like the guy trying to break into a house on an alarm company commercial.
That is now the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. Anyway, Wright Thompson, one of the few writers these days that when he writes something, you got to go get it because it's going to be good. He sunk deep into the life of Conor McGregor here. Thank you for joining us, Wright. What did you learn? What would you say that are the most interesting things you learned that you did not know?
The most interesting thing for me is that, I mean, he's from a neighborhood that is, I mean, it's not like he grew up. It's not the poverty that makes the neighborhood bad. It's that there are two really bloody, sort of tabloid-friendly Dublin gangland wars that have happened in the city in the last 17 years, and both of them started in the neighborhood where he's from. So he just sort of grew up on the set of The Sopranos.
Okay, and explain that to us. What else? What kind of danger was he in?
Well, I mean, he's in he managed to avoid it, which is really an interesting reflection on his character, because for someone who wants a high life, it's interesting to see him avoid an easy way to get it. Because a lot of people who trained in the boxing gym where he used to train before he switched to MMA, you know, a lot of those guys were the foot soldiers in these two feuds. And so it's interesting to see someone so desperate for a new life being offered over and over and over again at a young age a chance to have it and turning it down. And that was surprising to me because he seemed like such a two-dimensional cartoon character, you know, with his ridiculous training, et cetera. So that was interesting to me because I didn't know or expect that.
So he hasn't left behind that life? You mean he keeps gravitating back toward that world?
No, I mean, he is still from there, but he knows all these guys, but he never got sucked into it. Like that felt like a reflection of character to me.
I felt in reading the piece, right, I felt like, and now we're grading on a curve, right, because Wright Thompson gets in real close to the soul of people, and even if you don't let him in yourself, he will get in there based on your friends or people who know you through reporting. I didn't feel like Conor let you as close as some other people do. Am I wrong?
Oh, no. I mean, you can't even imagine. I mean, I went out to Vegas for a week with an interview scheduled, and then they just didn't answer their phone. It was like the opening scene of Apocalypse Now. I'm sitting in a hotel room. I feel like Conor's out in the bush getting stronger, and I'm getting weaker. You know what I mean? Like I just sat there and waited on the phone to ring.
And it never rang? You waited a week in Vegas. You had a week in Vegas on ESPN's dime, and the phone never rang?
No, well, the problem with that, though, is like you don't want to go play cards because you don't want to miss the call, and they train at night, so you know what I mean? Like you don't want to be out all boozed up at the Italian American Club at 8:30 at night in Las Vegas, and then have your phone ring, and now I got to go talk to Conor. So
but answer my question though: you were in Vegas for a week and never got him?
No, I went back. I went back to Vegas to get him.
Okay.
Wright
So I
Thompson.
was in Vegas. Yeah, I was there and then didn't get him, and then went back and got him.
Wright Thompson with us here on ESPN Radio. How is Connor viewed in his hometown as opposed to how he's viewed everywhere else?
Well, I mean, depends on which part of his hometown. I mean, I think, the folks who love Rory McIlroy don't love Conor McGregor,
Right.
But in working class Dublin and in, the parts of Dublin that don't appear in Guinness commercials, he is, adored is such an overused word. We've overused all of the words to the point that none of them mean anything anymore. But, the guy it's something other than a sports star. I mean, it's really interesting to see up close.
How much did he actually show you himself, or was he guarded?
He was guarded. That's an interesting question because I can't decide whether he was guarded or it was just a function of the amount of time because it wasn't a lot of time. And so, I don't know what he would be like. I can't tell whether he would be like that on day 3. You know what I mean? Like whether that would have worn down at all.
But this is not normally how you do business, right? Like Michael Jordan let you into his life. Pat Riley let you into his life. You were just getting the minutes where you could with McGregor, correct?
Oh, dude, I think, 14 minutes with him. I mean, it was all other people. It was, and that, by the way, the story was supposed to be filed on a Friday. It was supposed to be filed a week ago. It was filed 10 days ago. And so I got him. That's when I got him.
Okay.
I got him on the day the story was due.
That's not how you work, though. That's not how you do it.
No. This was just, dude, you can't, you've had to do these things. You can't even imagine. This was, this was one that I sort of figured, well, we're just going to have to write it without him.
Well, you just get in there. This is an interesting time to try to do this because what you did with Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods and Tiger Woods didn't give you any access either, but what you did with those guys was comprehensive, and those guys let you in, but you weren't coming to them at the height of where their life is.
Well, that and it wasn't Connor. I mean, to some degree, and you've been through this too. I mean, the people around him are just everything's coming at them out of a fire hose, and so it's just it took a long time we couldn't even get a no. You know what I mean? All I wanted was a no.
Right. Tell us something about Conor McGregor that most people don't know.
That he...
You better have an answer to that question, right, if you want anybody to read this damn story.
Well, I know, but there are a lot of things.
Okay, well, give them all up then.
He's going through the Rolodex.
And by the way, because he's such a great reporter, this isn't going to come from the 14 minutes spent with Conor McGregor. It's going to come with all the reporting he did around Conor McGregor.
Yeah, when he was 14 or 15 years old, he got beat up by a drug dealer. And it's one of the things that pushed him into MMA because he's like, I got to learn how to defend myself if I'm going to be walking around. I wouldn't have found the guy who beat him up. Conor...
What did he have to say? He must have been very proud, right?
Oh yeah.
You know what was really interesting? He had so much respect for the distance Conor had traveled that there was no flexing or bravado, and he went out of his way to bring up on his own. I wouldn't fight him now, and he wasn't scared of me. He was scared of sort of one that I might stab him, or the fact that I was in a gang and he wasn't, and so that he might end up cross with the wrong people. Because it was interesting. The guy wanted to make really clear that fair play to you, Connor. Those guys that he used to know growing up have a lot of respect for the distance he's covered. I think the thing you don't know about Connor is, he's an active imagination. I mean, his psyche can be fragile like Muhammad Ali's. Norman Mailer used to write about Ali.
Most fighters, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. You have to approach his psyche like you'd approach a squirrel's. I mean, Connor is a function of the information allowed in and the information not allowed in, and so that's really interesting to me that the coaches around him are smart enough to really, he needs to visualize things and imagine them coming true. He was a plumber, like Goodwill Hunting. He was a plumber, and he was on a job site, and this was probably a decade ago, and it was just pissing rain one day at lunch, and he's in a parking lot, and he just had this realization, if I don't leave this job right now, I'm going to look up and be 50. And so he quit. And his dad, who worked in a factory and was a taxi driver and just really humped it to sort of eke out a living, his dad beat this, I almost cursed, I forgot. I just feel like I'm talking to Dad on my phone, and I forget that I'm on the radio. He beat the crap out of him because his dad just didn't understand. And they ended up, living in the same house and not speaking because his parents didn't understand why he didn't just accept the future that was laid out for him and what he was doing, and they thought he was wasting his life, making excuses. And so, I mean, he created all of this out of nothing. I mean, basically, this kid from the hood in Dublin has talked himself into this fight.
It's
crazy.
It's sort of crazy. The whole thing is nuts. Crazy. That part is crazy. He has talked his way into $100 million. That part is nuts. And what he's talking about, where he came from, it's crazy. The idea, the obstacles that this guy had to traverse to get here.
Yeah, it's where he's from is, this is my own sort of stereotypes or whatever, but I mean, I've been to Dublin a couple of times, but just as a tourist. And so, I had a very different idea of Dublin than the one I saw on this trip.
Thank you, Wright. Again, check out the piece. Everything he writes is worth giving a shot. It's going to take you some time, but it's going to be worth it. Thank you, Wright, for being on with us.
Thanks, guys.
Dan Le Batard.
It really is amazing that you're a professional broadcaster.
Yep.
The most famous running back in the draft, this is not his name.
I feel like Zeke Elliott. I bailed quickly on that one.
Stugatz.
Hear what I did to poor Dory? Tune in every Saturday from 8 until noon Eastern for Dory and Mel with Dory Nokoa and Mel.
Oh, my God.
Nokia?
Oh, my God.
The camera.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugatz on ESPN Radio.
Texter writes in, do you realize how important Mike Ryan is to the show? Sorry if you already covered this today, but I didn't hear it. I am not listening to the show anymore until I get an answer on what happened to him. Hashtag free Mike. Mike Ryan made fun of Sal Palantonio's allegedly fake teeth last week. And then Mike Ryan got gone for a couple of days. That's what happened. And the show is a little bit different when any one of us are out, and no one of us is irreplaceable. All of us, everyone here can be replaced. Everyone.
This is a rare day, though, where both Mike and Guillermo are out.
But this is the running back position in the NFL. Ain't nobody here who's Ezekiel Elliott. Nobody. We are all disposable.
You got that right.
We are all, I'm trying to remember the name of that kid from FAU here who was very good for the Washington racial slurs for a couple of minutes. Was it Alfred?
Alfred Morris.
Yeah,
Morris.
And then where did he go? He was very good. He had one season shooting across the sky. The running back position, there ain't nothing quite like that in sports. Sean Alexander, he's great for a couple of years, and poof, where'd he go? What happened? Where'd Sean Alexander go?
I think Morris is with the Cowboys now, but you're right. He had that 1 year where he just...
Yeah, unstoppable. And then, so we'll get to Stugatz's weekend observations in the next segment here. I lied to you. My apologies. We didn't have enough time here in this segment to get to the weekend observations. But Jay Cutler is now the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. He's not playing this week. It is funny when you think about the idea that there aren't a lot of quarterbacks in the history of the league that come with the baggage of, he doesn't care very much. Like, it's hard to come about getting that reputation. Let's name all the guys. Now, I don't think this about Jay Cutler. I just remember feeling it for the first time, being stunned by people feeling it when they accused him of sitting out a playoff game because he wasn't really that hurt, just because he could walk on a knee that had been destroyed.
Right.
So
because walking on it and playing football on it are exactly the same thing.
There was something about him being injured and then sitting out that created a confirmation bias where people are like, yeah, he doesn't care. I knew he didn't care. Look at him. Just standing there on the sidelines of a playoff game. How many quarterbacks can we say that about? Aren't the only people we could say that about the busts? They don't stay around for Jay Cutler for as long as Jay Cutler has. The people who tend to have that reputation, Jamarcus Russell, Ryan Leaf, Jeff George. Jeff George hung around. Jay Cutler, closest thing I can think to Jay Cutler is Jeff George, where you see him throw a football and you're like, that guy is meant to throw a football at the highest levels of thrown footballs.
Correct, yes. Looks the part.
But those are the two guys? Is there anyone else that you could point to in the history of the position outside of Jay Cutler and Jeff George where you are not certain how much they care? Because gunslinger isn't enough. Brett Favre was a gunslinger, but nobody ever questioned how much Brett Favre cared.
I can't think of another outside of Cutler and George. I can't think of anywhere else.
Well, it's hard to do because you can't usually, very few people are gifted enough to be able to stay at that position and keep getting chances because of their level of talent. Despite that, because if I told, like Stugatz, I'm telling you, as it applies to Jay Cutler, and it speaks to the absence of good people playing that position. If I told most coaches, what do you want from your quarterback? You can only have one of them. A tremendous skill set or someone who cares really passionately.
Skill set.
Well, usually, no. See, I would say no, not at that position, Stugatz. Not at that position. It's not just skill set. Not the way that position has been turned into corporate leader. You can't have a guy at that position who you have questions about how much he cares because too many of the other guys are dying, physically giving their bodies under a different set of rules to have that guy as the leader in their huddle. When they're trying that hard, they can't be questioning about how much their leader with a disproportionate amount of the value cares.
Last year, didn't Ray Lewis call out Joe Flacco for having a lack of passion?
Yeah, because of body language, because that was, Ray Lewis being Ray Lewis. His sensibilities are the only sensibilities that matter. If Joe Flacco doesn't go out on the field, coming out of the tunnel doing a dance, then he doesn't care as much as I do.
But you rather have like an Alex Smith who clearly cares but doesn't have a skill set.
Well, never mind what I'd rather have.
I'd rather have the skill set and try to make them care.
I think coaches would understanding that we're talking about at the highest levels of this relatively equal skill sets. I don't think, Stugatz, do you think that Tom Brady is more skilled than most people? Or do you think Tom Brady cares more than most people?
More prepared, which means he probably cares more than most people.
Stugatz's weekend observations next.
Don Le Batard.
Creepy as F.
Stugatz.
I had a cat, Schmitty. He died.
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugatz on ESPN Radio.
Texter writes in, Kaepernick is so much better than Cutler. Dan is covering Miami Cuban racism against blacks. That's right. You got me. It's not that Cutler and Kaepernick are pretty similar. Statistically, I mean. Not physically. They're very different physically. Although I would love to see Jay Cutler with an afro. But because I don't feel that they're that different as quarterbacks, I'm not going to turn this into a topic that I talk about all day. So, time now for Stugatz's weekend observations.
It is time for Stugatz to share his game notes. No one in the media will tell you what happened better than my boy Stu.
Weekend observations brought to you by Metro PCS. Get 2 free awesome LG K20 Plus smartphones with 32 gigs of memory when you switch 2 lines to Metro PCS.
Are you okay?
Sales tax not included.
What's happening?
A piece of chicken came out of my mouth.
Chris, what happened there? Are you laughing because you physically saw the chicken fly out of his mouth?
I saw the chicken fly out, and it looked like he was about to just fall over.
Yeah, I don't know where it went, the piece of chicken.
That is the way that you're going to die on air. That is how we're going to lose you. It's going to be a piece of chicken flies out of your mouth, then your head falls on the microphone, and you die right on the air.
So unhealthy.
Oh, my God, are you?
Dan, we are just 31 days away from finding out if the Raiders are for real. Florida State, Alabama, Chick-fil-A, kickoff game, the rare opening week, must win for both teams. Speaking of Chick-fil-A, Want to cure your hangover? Chick-fil-A, fried chicken sandwich, 2 pickles, extra mayo, with a side of waffle fries. Just don't get hungover on a Sunday. Well, Dan, we are now guaranteed to see Mike Tomlin make it out of stadiums alive until 2020. I'm pretty sure a certain 3-year deal for $35 million for a certain somebody that doesn't deserve a 3-year, $35 million deal is the reason Doc Rivers is no longer the president of the LA Clippers. If nepotism had a look, it would look like Doc Rivers. Reports are Doc is upset that he was stripped of his role as team president. Please, cry me a Rivers. If I'm coaching the Texans, what happened there? Cry me a Rivers. If I'm coaching the Texans and DeAndre Hopkins thinks Tom Savage should be the starter, then Tom Savage is going to be my starter. Byron Scott is done coaching. Said he's had enough. Byron, you were 454 and 647. I'm pretty sure the NBA has had enough of you.
You don't get to quit coaching. It would appear that coaching has quit you. The NBA has quit you.
I'm no longer interested. Well, no one was interested in you, Byron.
Right.
Never happened before. Someone's bust looks more like a human face than his actual face. Congratulations, Jerry Jones. What the hell is going on at Fox? Usain Bolt, bust. Justin Gatlin, do it in the Olympics. I bet you Jason Taylor's beautiful scent is still prominent in the Canton air. It stays with you for days, sometimes weeks. Jerry Jones, just know this. You might be a Hall of Famer, but in my own personal record book, you are not.
I love the Stugat's own personal record book.
In my own personal record book, Jerry Jones does not own the gold jacket. Ryan Tannehill, out for a long time. Adam Schefter was right. That knee was a ticking time bomb. Dolphin fans.
That would have been good to know, by the way, before he went down.
Yes.
Adam Schefter
I hear a single person say it.
Adam Schefter was right there for us after he crumbled on the sidelines. I think somebody should have told us that a little bit earlier than that.
Dolphin fans, smoke them if you got them. Tom Brady, talking about his concussion, said it's none of our business. Hey, Tommy, your wife made it our business. The best part of Jason Taylor's Hall of Fame speech was him never mentioning Bill Parcells, the big tuna. If you granted each Hall of Fame bust 5 minutes to do whatever it wants, Jason Taylor's bust would kick the living bleep out of Bill Parcells. Colin Kaepernick, you are just 2 serious quarterback injuries away from getting a job.
Just 2?
Maybe.
Sure? Christian Ponder.
Perhaps.
Christian Ponder's going to make an appearance here somewhere.
We'll see. Jay Cutler has decided to take his below-average talents and a carton of cigarettes to South Beach. Like Jason Taylor, one day, Jay Cutler is going to make a speech in which he thanks Stephen Ross for allowing him to steal a lot of money from the Dolphins. Unlike Jason Taylor, it won't be a Hall of Fame speech. Kirk Cousins discussing why he doesn't want a long-term contract. Some gibberish about a foundation of sand that is shifting, and it's not a healthy way to live. Kirk, do me a favor. Knock it off with the philosophy crap and just play some football. Jeez, you're Kirk Cousins.
Mediocrely. Just play some football mediocrely.
Foundations of sand. What are you talking about? Dodgers, best team in the history of Major League Baseball. All is quiet in Rileyville. And you know what that means? It means Kyrie Irving. Don't want to read between the lines here and try to read body language. But I'm pretty certain Jimmy Johnson wanted to strangle Jerry Jones. How is there a Hall of Fame that has Jerry Jones in it and not Jimmy Johnson? I'm reporting this exclusively. When Jason Taylor said Miami Dolphin fans are the best fans in the NFL, he didn't mean it. Showtime Willie Reed. Jail time Willie Reed. That Giancarlo Stanton contract, I got caught up there. That Giancarlo Stanton contract is starting to look better and better.
No!
Oh, it is. He's mashing. Have you seen him since the All-Star break?
Yes.
He's up to like 37 homers. The guy is amazing.
Is he better than Freddie Freeman this season? Is he better than Freddie Freeman? Because he hits a ton of home runs, but his OPS, is he better than Freddie Freeman? I'm sorry to interrupt.
We're on it. God, would have been so great if the Dolphins signed Kyle Orton instead of Colin Kaepernick. Dave Zirin might have spontaneously combusted. What the hell just happened
That's
to me?
your word.
It was Mike's word. Mike put it in there.
Mike's not even here.
Yeah, but I sent it to him, and he sent them back to me, and he put a big word in there because he likes to put in big words there to trip me up. And that's what he did. Dave Zirin might have spontaneously combusted if Kyle Orton got signed instead of Colin Kaepernick. Morton Anderson is in the Hall of Fame before Terrell Owens. Hell we doing? Speaking of hell, I imagine all they do in hell is talk about Game of Thrones. And one of those people talking about Game of Thrones in hell is Art Briles. Dan, those are the weekend observations spontaneously.
All right. A couple of things for you here in the next segment. We're going to update the polls. We're going to talk about whether Matt Leinert's a bum. We're going to talk about whether Kelly Olynyk looks like he would backpack across Europe. And we're going to talk about whether the Dolphins, game one, should give out as a giveaway cigarettes to their fans. Cigarettes in honor of Jay Cutler. Also, Freddie Freeman's OPS is better than Giancarlo Stanton.
Ooh, that contract's starting to look worse and worse.
Flash!
Really?
Yes, it is. And not by a little bit either.
Oh, wow.
Are you in need? Because he hits a lot of home runs. Stanton hits a lot of home runs. And look, his OPS is good. It's just not $300 million good.
Right. It's like 980, I think Stanton is right now.
You can listen to the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio, and you can watch on ESPNU.